Today, Dennis, it's really become an important thing for us as business owners to really understand our business, not just the things that we do every day. If I'm an engineer, I certainly know engineering. If I'm a dentist, I know how to do the things that a dentist is going to take care of. But it's the numbers behind our business that for a lot of small business owners, especially, they may be overlooking that, not even doing anything with it. And for some of the businesses that are doing things with their data, we need to understand what that data holds for us and really how we should be looking at it.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's one, if you think about data and what you're doing with, it's a process, but people don't think of it as a process. And things just kind of flow in and happen in many cases. And that's where you end up with this dirty data that allows you not to have a clear picture. Think of it, it's like putting your head in a river that's polluted and you're trying to find your car key that you dropped in the river. It's hard to find it because there's just clutter and, it's dirty. You can't see things versus if you dropped your keys in a clear pond and you put your head in there and you opened your eyes, you can see the key and you can grab it. Great example of if you clean things up and make things organized and have a process, it allows you and your team to be so much more productive and successful. And today we've got an expert that we're going to talk about dirty data and clean data and the benefits and pros and cons.
Yeah. Matt Kroll is the principal and founder at Chalmers St Consulting. He really has a lot of insight in terms of some of the operations and really he spells it out really nicely about how we can better use our data, collect our data, and some of the things that we don't think about on a daily basis and what that means for us. So let's have a listen to this podcast. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this one.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
So Dennis, one of the things that I hear from time to time, because I've suddenly gotten a lot of AI questions when it comes to my business, is about being able to do various things with the data that we have, right? We have all of this data. I have a retail store and I'm now going to be able to do things that I wasn't able to do before. It was going to cost so much money. And now it's really something that's useful. But along the way, that doesn't actually become the case. There actually is a lot of things that go aside from that we don't really think about because we were collecting all this data. But, we were going to save it. Some people were just saving it or they were trying to figure out what to do with it at some point. But there's more to it than that, isn't there?
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, all companies are data rich. They got lots of data. Where they're struggling is they're information poor because they can't turn it into what they need it to do, or they've got it so chaotic that it doesn't come to life for them and they give up or they get frustrated. And so that's why it's so important to make sure you've got clean data. And we're going to talk about that today on today's podcast about what is clean data and what's all that mean and what's the benefit to your organization as you go through that process.
So we have to bring in the expert who knows this stuff and can really talk about it. Matt, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Benny. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate being invited back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the quality of the data that we have and really what does that all mean for people? Now some people, this might be a brand new thing for them. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a definition of what this all means?
Sure. Data quality means that we have captured the information in a way that it meets an expected outcome or usage, a report that we want. So if we're looking for dimensional information on materials stored in a warehouse, do we have all the dimensions captured? Are we using, is there a unit of measure that we've defined and we're using correctly? There's some, it's just like speccing out a product, honestly. There's some specification that we need in order to make that data usable. Data quality is, are we meeting that specification? And I'll just add there, like we've seen in quality over the years, there isn't always enough specking out of that data. And so we don't know whether or not we're actually hitting the quality. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. And part of the challenge I've seen, is you've got people just kind of assume they're going to know all this stuff and they make things up or they leave it blank and they don't ask the right questions as they're trying to understand what it is they need to track. Matt and I live in kind of that inventory world a lot. So there's, they always want to know, the product, the spec, the quantity, but there's other things that they may need to capture somewhere in the process. And it doesn't mean it's the receiving person that's going to capture that. It could be the person that's setting up the item. So the it may reside somewhere else in the database to do its magic. And that's where I think process is so important, because a lot of times they leave it to that warehouse person to be responsible for all this. Well, that warehouse person, they just want to make sure the product is on the shelf and is available for internal use or consumers or whatever it is they're doing. They're not worrying about all the data. They're worrying about the quantities because they don't want to run out, but they don't care about some of this other stuff.
And can I add to that? So you're touching on a point that's really important, and that is we assume that it's common sense. And Dennis, I think you, in the kind of the tools that you build, you see this. Well, put the customer name in. Okay, what's the customer name, right? Is it the legal name that I have to go look up on the state's website? Are they doing business under another name that I need to capture? Is it the name of the owner and the name, what do you mean by customer name? So we assume that it's common sense. And again, we don't spec out what define how we want to capture that piece of information. And now you go, months, years into the future, and you have hundreds, thousands of junk data inside of your database.
An example I was sharing with Matt and Benny before we started recording. I mean, like with our clients, they had the Home Depot. They had the Home Depot in Brentwood Home Depot, and the Home Depot in Brentwood on Moores Lane. All four the same thing, but in the data system, it was 4 unique different instances. They had a contract with Home Depot that they got a certain discount when they hit certain levels. Well, because in their system, they had it all messed up. They weren't getting those discounts correctly because the system was thinking that it was 4 separate entities and not treating it as one. And there's things you can do. You can still have the 4 different names, but then you can tie them all back together. That's kind of that's after the fact. Ideally, you want to kind of get it cleaned up. And to Matt's point, have that process on the front side of identifying how you're going to set these companies up, or how you're going to set the items up, or the people, or whatever it is you're doing, and have a process. And then make sure you educate all the people that touch it, because a lot of times it's not the inventory person, it's the accounting person, it's the salesperson. There's different ones that in your pipeline sets this up, because in many cases it could be driven by sales. Sales is the first one that starts the process, and they're tracking it in their CRM, and then eventually it pushes over to someone's accounting system, and then they try to change it or tweak it, and then eventually it rolls into that inventory or shipping system. And so you could end up with the same company with 4 different names in 4 different systems, because you're not using a system that goes and talks to one another.
Yeah. And this might sound familiar to some of the listeners out there too as well, where the people who are the employees working within the systems think this is stupid because the guys who are putting this together don't understand. And they're just going to do things like leave blank spaces in critical areas of information, or they don't understand, or it's a redundant piece of information. To your point, Dennis, the education piece and letting people know why you have to do this will give them the ability to say, look, we'll help you do your job better. And really, for the people who are designing the systems, you need to be listening to them to understand why this doesn't work very well as well. For them as well, because we're doing this for one of my clients right now, and we're designing a system and trying to figure out some of the gaps. Because Matt, you tell me, what are clients thinking now with AI and all the data that they've done? They really don't need to change this, because I'm hearing some really crazy things what people think AI is going to be able to do for them.
I think we're still certainly learning what AI is going to do for us. My personal experience with AI at this point is, the large language models are pretty powerful for organizing notes, helping organize marketing materials. And I think when we start getting into some of the operational data, I believe the AI will start helping us organize that. But the reality is, if I have junk in there, it's gonna do the hallucination that I keep hearing people talk about so much. Like, well, why does it hallucinate? Well, I don't know if it's hallucinating so much as it's looking for clusters, right, of repeatable information to more or less make predictions on what's the answer to this question. And if we have a lot of poor answers or poor information in that data, it's going to hallucinate more often. It's going to make things worse, right? Because people will assume the AI is right. That's what I'm concerned with as my team, frankly, starts to use AI in more of our work. Like, okay, but we're never going to assume that the AI is right. It's like the example I was given, it's like hiring a really good intern. You can give that person a whole bunch of different work to do. But when you get to some of the edge cases of work, or some of the harder, let's just say more complex type of things, that intern's going to make mistakes. AI is going to make those mistakes. It's going to make more mistakes when it has bad information that's working off of.
So Matt, what is going to be the kind of an order of operations when it comes to making sure the data quality that we're doing is going to be the correct data? You know, what are some things that we as business owners should be thinking about, and the way that we look at this information, and how do we best do it? What's kind of those steps?
Yeah. So Dennis said the magic words: process, training, and those are so broad. We have to get very specific anytime that we're building process, but we need process and we need training. And specifically, we need to understand the inputs into our systems, meaning the information inputs. I have dimensional data for, like I said, for maybe things that I'm storing in shelving. I have part number data. I have customer data. Each one of those is an input into my process. And I need to understand who's putting it in, where is it coming from, what is the tool that we're using to store it, and then how am I ensuring that the person putting it in is trained properly to do that correct. That also takes, just like with any process, right? I'm always thinking of inputs, process, outputs, right? I'm always thinking of those three things. IPO, you may have heard of: inputs, process, outputs. So the outputs are going to be reports. The outputs are going to be information that is required to either manage my business or potentially that I provide to my customer. And so I want to understand what data is going into those reports. We have a client that is using scrap information to understand their scrap costs. Great. We found that, a lot of that scrap data is manually input. They're doing counting of small parts. And guess what? There's a lot of mistakes in that counting. So I have to figure out how to make it easier for my folks doing the counting, make it easier for them to get that right. I have to look at where the different parts in the process that they're doing that counting, so that I can try and use those as checks and the validation of the data. And then I can be more confident of the output. So that's really the second piece there. And it's also part of process, which is, what are my inspection points? So if I've trained someone on how to enter, what was your example, Dennis, the Home Depot, right? So if I've trained someone how to properly enter the customer information for the Home Depot, or actually for any of our clients, are they doing it? And when I trained that one person on how to do it and they were off, and then I had the other person, right, who's never done it before, the temp or whoever, did they do it right as well? Did I have the training to make sure that I communicated to them how to correctly enter the Home Depot information? And then did I check to see if I'm getting mistakes in there? Those checks they're both a point of cleaning. So I can make sure that over time, I'm not building up, big sections of data that's bad. So I'm cleaning, but it's also root cause. So I can ask, why did that data go in incorrectly? And now let me go back to my process and make improvements.
The other thing also is to think about, try to get it so that there's less free form data entry fields.
Yes.
And have it where it's drop downs or check boxes.
Data validations.
And so that way, because we see a lot where that'll have, 1 inch by 2 inches, and it'll be 1 inch space X space 2 inches. Other ones will be 1 inch X 2 inches. And so it's the same thing again, but again, it just becomes something else. And that could be important, especially if you're trying to do cubing to figure out a load or whatever it is you're doing. Again, you're trying to make it so that you're using common sense, but also making it as easy and simple for that end user. And as the people that are designing the process, you've got to step back and think about the lowest level person that's probably going to be entering this data. They may not speak English really well. They may not care about this really well. There's all kinds of reasons why. And so you've got to try to make it as dummy proof as you can for those people so that they can kind of move through. And some of them, they're busy. And so they're having to do this, and this is not their top priority, and they'll make mistakes. And so if you can help do that, it'll make life easier.
And this, I want to stay on our little Home Depot example. Is Home Depot one word or is it 2 words? If we say that it's 2 words, Home Depot, did someone accidentally put 2 spaces between Home and Depot? And now when I run my report, are those going to show up as 2 line items? Does it not show up at all? This is these are very minor, meticulous things that have a large impact in the end. And so data validation is part of it, because I think data validation can help us get it clean on the front end, but it's not going to get everything. And so there's still an inspection, right, that needs to take place, a check to ensure that we're catching those little things, retraining, looking for more data validations. That's a great error proof.
I mean, another great one to look at is a lot of times states are a free form. It's like, make that a drop down, because you'll see Indiana spelled out. You'll see it as IND, IN. So if you're trying to do a report on, how many customers do you have in the state of Indiana, and I filter on IN, you might get it, you might not. Or if you filter on Indiana, you're not going to get them all. So it's just things like that it seems like it's simple logic, but it causes all kinds of problems down the road when you're trying to do reporting in your process. The other piece that I would say is also have a plan in place periodically through the year, just to on those key data points. And you're going to have lots of data, but some of the key things, just have someone spot check things, because even with a great process in place, something's going to go wrong. And so it's a chance. And you can always filter on addresses and emails, because those are great ones that you'll catch duplicates. And so it'll begin to pop up. And that's the kind of stuff you can run through AI to say, hey, tell me all the ones that have Dennis at worksolution.com, and you see it's listed 5 times. Well, then I know I need to merge 4 of those into one and pick which one I want it to go to, because it should all be in one spot. Those are things you can do.
The other thing, Benny, when I think about data process or data quality process, however we want to term that, is Dennis and I are talking a lot about correctness of the data quality, but there's also completeness, and that is another place where we can miss. So I was talking about dimensional data in warehousing, often something that doesn't get collected. Unit of measure is it a box, is it a piece? Those things get collected, weight get collected, but what's the actual cube? Like, some of that stuff gets missed. And I share that just as an example, because again, we want to know what ways we may use this data, because that will prevent us from omitting key pieces of data that are part of the data quality, that I need to have the whole picture, right? Is it enough to know the duration of the activity, or am I actually needing to capture timestamps of when the activity began and when the activity ended? Those are 2 different types of data. One might just be number of minutes or number of seconds. The other one is the actual time and potentially the actual date. So those things have to be thought of as well in creating my data process, so I get the data that I need in the end as an output.
So let me ask, guys, and I'll throw this out to you, Matt, first, but if I understand, it's nice to have this data, and I'm able to, if I could take advantage of it, still be really informative and usable for me. But for those of us out there, maybe who aren't really doing anything with our data, or maybe we're just kind of using a minimal amount of data that we've collected for the last 20 years, and that seems to be okay. What am I missing out on? What disadvantage am I at by not really looking at my data and kind of going a step further beyond that? What am I really missing out on anything? It seems to be working fine. We're doing well. We had 3% growth over last year. I'm okay with that. What are we missing here by not doing things like that?
I mean, the classic line is you manage what you measure. And I think maybe that's the easiest starting point for what you're saying there. When I think of my own business, what kind of data do I have? The easiest kind of stuff is, well, we're a consulting firm, so I've got hours and projects and those sorts of things. Those help me, to your point, understand, am I working at a level of margin that I continue to run the company? So maybe at the catastrophic side of things, Benny, it's like, if I'm not collecting that data and turning it into usable insights, I'm putting my business at risk. I think I think everybody knows that, right? Everybody knows that. But there's also data in the contracts that I write. There's terms and conditions, certainly. There's information about what I expect of my clients. There's information about the objectives of the project. And if I can start to look at maybe multiple contracts and look for themes across them, I might be able to find efficiencies. If I can start to tie good project outcomes to ways that a contract was written, I start to pull out insights that make my business better, right? So it's not just about avoiding the catastrophic things, but it's fine tuning and making for a better operation. That's where I think we're going with these data streams that are now, we're collecting more of it. Like you said, we've got the Internet of Things, right? So every little device is collecting something. There's so much insight that can be pulled out of that if we understand how that data is getting there and the underlying quality of that data. So for me, it's not just I only can measure what I manage or manage what I measure. I think it's actually fine-tuning insights to run a better operation.
Yeah, and Benny, I think a couple other things happen too. With chaotic data, it causes your employees to have to work actually harder because they're all having to. They're usually it's causing conflict, is what it's doing. Because Matt will have one report, I'll have another report, and we'll sit there and argue about the same thing. That if we had the right information, we wouldn't have to sit there and point fingers at each other. The other one is it's adding costs that you don't think about. We've got a client that they do about 5,000 bids a year, so a lot. And I asked him, how many of those 5,000 do you win? And it was only about 1,000. So there's like 4,000. And I said, so how much does it cost you to do a bid? He says somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000. I'm like, that's a shitload of money you're doing on bidding. And he didn't have any information. And so now it's start pulling. And so now it's like, okay, when you don't win this bid, why? Is it because, you're competing against a competitor and they're just using you to have it? So, because they deal with the government a lot. So they needed 3 bids. So it's like, just tell them, no, I'm not going to bid on these because you're never win it. Because you start seeing that every time they bid against company ABC, they never won. So it's like, it doesn't matter if you gave the shit away free, they ain't going to buy from you.
But Dennis, deep insights. I think you and I are saying kind of the same thing. The opportunity is deep insights. That's a miss. And today, maybe we call it an opportunity, but everybody is chasing these deep insights. It's going to be table stakes. It's going to what keeps you in business or puts you out of business in the future is your ability to pull deep insights out of your data.
Correct. And so it's like, so now it's helping them look and say, maybe I shouldn't be doing 5,000 bids. Maybe I should only be responding to 1,200 or something. The ones that I lose that I had a chance to win, why didn't I win it? Was it because I wasn't in the right location? I didn't have the right price. My timing was off. Whatever. Now you start asking questions that before they were never asking. So those are types of things. And again, part of the challenge was they had crappy data because they didn't even know that they were sending a bid for the same company 5 different times because they called it 5 different companies. And so in their mind, it was 5 separate bids. It was actually the same damn bid. If you'd had it spelled out right, you'd have caught it and you'd said, stop those 4. And if he was paying $10,000, he just saved $40,000 to the bottom line by not doing it. So those are the types of things that I think as a business owner that begin to come to light. And that's where Matt and I and others hopefully help you see that with better organized data and to Matt's point, with that process that really helps you get that information that takes that data from data and turns it into true information that lets you make better decisions. That's where you're trying to get to.
Matt, this is a fascinating topic. And I really don't know much about some of the things that you and Dennis are talking about, but I find it fascinating. And I know that with your company, and Matt, by the way, just let you know, he is the founder and principal at Chalmers St Consulting. And I think I love this tagline a lot, what you had shared with me, making continuous improvement accessible. I think that's fantastic. Hey, Matt, I also know that you have a new software platform that you have rolled out. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, in the spirit of that accessibility, we look for more ways to bring strong continuous improvement ability to everybody in the organization. So having a black belt on site to coach everybody isn't always the most accessible way to do that. And so we've turned a lot of our templates and tools and training into a software platform that we're utilizing right now. We've got tools that help people run projects. Maybe the one that we're most proud of is our Leader Standard Work tool. It's really helping define a supervisor's day and ensure that they are hitting all the major things that they need to get done. And it gives a dashboard to their leader. And so again, we're just really trying to we take what we do and we think, how do we operationalize this or package this in a way that can be easier, more cost effective to deliver. And that's what the CI Mastermind platform is doing for us.
And you also have a community associated with this program too as well, right?
Yeah, the community helps us get a lot of ideas. It's called CI Mastermind Live. We meet once a month and we cover a topic that is of interest to people in CI, continuous improvement roles. It is really about 15 minutes of content. I would say, let's say one-way delivered content and 30 minutes of discussion. So really what we're trying to do is have everybody walk out of there with something that they can use back in their firm. Again, in that spirit of, really acting and doing and continuous improvement. That's what we try to create with the CI Mastermind Live group. And we meet once a month, and people can go find that by looking at my LinkedIn site, Matthew R. Kroll. They can look up our website, www.chalmersstreet. That's chalmersst.com. And they can see, they can learn about our platform. They can learn about the CI Mastermind Live community. They can see our newsletters and blog posts. We really try and put a lot of content out there because we're very serious about making this accessible. We think it's important to every business, large and small.
Yeah, if you're not on Matt's email or blogs, I would encourage you. It comes out monthly, correct, Matt?
Yes, that's right.
Always has great messaging. I always make sure I read that one. There's always insight that kind of tickles your brain to kind of think, I hadn't thought about that, or it gives you connections with other people. So, I mean, it's a good tool. If you're not getting it, definitely plug into that one.
Matt, this has been a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thanks. I feel a little bit more educated about data quality and why it's important. But thanks for stopping by. We appreciate it. We'll definitely have you back on again.
Awesome. Glad to be here. And I look forward to being back on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.